Or is that?
Usually we'll
No, it
say.
should, it should.
Oh,
Yeah, it comes.
perfect. Any public comments now or at the time it comes up on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll go to item 3. Review, approve the previous meeting's minutes.
Move to approve.
Motion
Second.
by Supervisor LaFontaine, second by Supervisor Bry. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 4, the PSC grant opportunities. Ruben or Nancy, would you like to kick it off here and get us up to date on
Sure.
what's going on?
Why don't I start by giving an overview of the components that we have in the application at the moment, and then we can loop back to the work that Ruben has been doing on one or two of the components. Let me see if I can share my screen. Too many screens open. Okay. Can you see a document that says Faith
ma'am.
Technologies?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So we've been working on putting the grant proposal together and taking the steps to move forward on it. And excuse me, identified about 5 tasks that can fit within it. So again, we'd probably look for your feedback on whether you want to tackle all these tasks or not. The first task was our main priority, to do the building audits for some of the key buildings for efficiencies, renewables, and microgrids in the case of healthcare centers. The second task is an audit of fuel consumption and then thinking about strategies for reduction. So that would be vehicles as well as facilities. Task 3 is looking at EV infrastructure, and in our minds, we were primarily focusing on, or thinking of focusing on, if the county obtained EVs, are there plans for existing infrastructure to be put in place where it is needed, or are there gaps? So that's how we frame that, rather than planning, for all kinds of users within the county. I think you could go either way with that, but right now that we have the scope primarily focused on county needs. And then task 4 is looking at the carbon storage management changes that could enhance carbon storage and the marketability of that carbon on county lands, so primarily parks and forests. And then we have an educational piece within the county energy plan. So I pretty much pulled that out and made that task 5, numbered task 6 there, so that we get sufficient points for doing those activities that we were planning on doing anyway. And those are mostly having meetings with staff, county staff, to get ideas from them, and then developing a method to get some tips back out to them for energy savings. And then pulling all these pieces into an energy plan. So with more detailed information about the buildings, the facilities, as well as, we have an overarching plan, but we never really drilled down yet to get to what specifics we're doing and when, and maybe how much things cost and that sort of thing. So moving that plan into a more detailed, usable document that can be used better for county planning. We certainly have lots of to-do lists within there. And, by the time this project is completed, we may have checked off quite a few of the items in the energy plan. So we may want to revisit it and see if there are other things we should be thinking about that come out of these tasks. So I can either take questions about the big picture, or we can let Ruben talk about his experience with Faith Technologies and other building or facility managers and whatnot.
Are there any questions for Nancy?
I'd go for it, let's get over to Ruben. maybe
Okay.
first.
Ruben, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I'll add to that as much as I can. Last week, at the end of the week, I met with Dale, our rep from Faith Technologies, and he brought with him another gentleman from Faith Technologies from down towards Milwaukee that specializes in some of the things that we're looking at doing as well. So, just in talking with them and hearing some of the experience they have, it sounds like they would be quite knowledgeable on doing this type of analysis for us. One thing that I would mention, I believe Dale is going to call in about 9:15, so if there's any questions for him specifically, he'll be online. So I don't know, Nancy, if you saw the preliminary proposal that Dale typed up. Did he send that to you?
No, I have not seen that, Ruben.
Okay, let me forward that, because he sent me something yesterday evening, and printed copies, and I handed that out here, so Al, you'll
Okay.
get this also. Let me send that. There's no subject, but it's there. So I called Dale this morning right
Could you
away
send
when I
one,
saw that.
Lance, do you want a copy of that? Or-
Sure, we got an extra one.
And Bill, you have a copy?
Yeah, I gave him.
Okay.
So, one thing that I thought when I saw what I gave to you this morning is that I was expecting maybe a little more quantity of information rather than just several pages. I was expecting more than that. And so that's why when you commented on the cost seemed a little bit high, I expected it to be higher because I thought we were going to really get to dive in here. And that was just my understanding. What I had thought was, with the possibility of grant funding, let's take advantage of as much as we can and get as much out of that study as possible. So regardless, this is another step in the right direction. So it's not that we have to demand that we go farther than what this offers, but it's possible that we could. And I think
Good
Dale
morning.
will address that. Dale, is
Yep,
that you?
I did. Yep, I did
Okay.
join.
So
Good morning.
I know that when I talked to Dale this morning, he did say they can go beyond this, but what they generally do, this is the normal first step. And that's why you have what you see in front of you this morning. That's the most common. And so if we want more than that, it's possible. It would take a little more time. But, again, we're a little bit restricted also with our deadline coming up for the grant application. So
Yeah, I was going to add to that, Ruben, that we fully can go further. It's just hard to, without identifying items first, it's hard to envision what kind of time or commitment and who needs to be involved until we understand what we're after. You know what I mean? We're kind of taking a guess at what potentially we would have involved in timing. If that makes sense.
Right. I know that Sherry Gruda with Extension in Madison area works with communities with energy plans a lot, and she had recommended working with Faith Technologies because you're up in this area, but she may be able to give insight on how the other engineering firms have been able to make cost estimates and get the final product, in a 1-year planning process instead of expanding this out. So I can get you her contact information if you're not sure how to scope that.
No, we could scope it. I just would have to get other people involved. I mean, that's probably my fault a little bit. I didn't know at what level, how hard you wanted to go at this. There's things like from just walking around with Ruben that I can already tell you, like any type of renewables, we easily can take that all the ways to a solid solution. That's not an issue. Anything electrical, definitely, we're absolute solid. You start getting into plumbing and gas and natural gas type stuff, we would probably look for a partner or use someone that you guys are comfortable with, and then we'd have guys in pricing. But I can definitely take this a next step, 2 steps higher and deeper, if that's what you're looking for. And that sounds like what you're looking for.
Well, I think I don't want to speak for the committee, so I'll let them respond to your question, actually.
I would be happy with getting as much as we can if this is all going to be included on a grant. Do you think if this scope was expanded, it would decrease our chance of being accepted for the grant, or?
Absolutely not.
So we
It
wouldn't
would
be,
probably improve it. They want you to have a deliverable where you can walk away and you have your to-do list and you can make your decisions.
Yeah, I could definitely. Oh, sorry. I was going to say areas that you're looking for, like the microgrid. I know that has come up in conversation. We could definitely run a scope on what it would take to do that analysis. Ruben and I talked about Norwood's in pretty good shape. So maybe the next step for them might be looking at some solar. We could definitely run an analysis on what that would look like and with cash flows and ROIs. Boiler changeouts and things like that. That gets a little deeper. That gets a little more complicated on estimating cost and things like that and ROIs. But we can make an assessment or an estimate of time that it would take to do the engineering analysis on that. I just got kind of literally last week was my first time stepping foot on any of the properties. And so we're a little bit behind the ball here. So I just a little.
Are there any questions
So,
or
Dale,
comments?
I have a question in terms of timing. Are you guys talking on your end?
No, you go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, so in terms of timing, you have on page 2 of your report or somewhere towards the beginning of the report, you have a table where you've done some level of assessment, low, high, medium impact. Can you give us a sense of how long it takes for you to get to that point, to knowing that information?
That would be right on the report right away. We can tell you what kind of impact it's going to have. And actually, I was talking to Ruben this morning. Normally on my report, I'll do green, yellow, and orange. Green being ease of implementation. Yellow being needs more information, and then orange being it needs a full study full engineering study to come up with cost and ROI. But implementation and ease of implementation and impact, we can come up with that right away on this report. I'll just add another column that has implementation.
But my question is timing. So is that 2 months after the grant, 5 months after the grant? Where would we be to have a table similar to the one on page 2?
That'd be right on this. That I'll just add that column. That we can figure that out right away. We got enough, we've done this enough with enough businesses where we kind of know the impact that it's gonna have. We just don't have the dollars, and every situation's a little bit unique. Like the other thing that we're behind on is normally at this point, I would have all your utility information, your 15-minute interval data, places that you have time of use, and we would know exactly like the impact it would have on your demand charges, the impact it would have on your monthly charges. We would know all that going into this study. But like I say, we're starting a little bit. We're kind of pushing things here a little bit fast, and we like to kind of step back and make sure we're taking a holistic approach and getting everything kind of listed on a document, and then sitting down with the board or Ruben or whoever, and you kind of like picking the things that would really mean the most to those locations, and then we'll run the numbers through and do a full analysis of that. That's normally the process, but that's not to say I can't estimate some additional time that it would take to do that. Just we're not just used to doing it in one step. We usually do it in a couple steps, but I totally understand what you guys are doing here with the grant. So you wanna, if you can get the funding, you wanna just get it all to do that whole process.
Right, and we did have the RETA report done, so we have our buildings prioritized already. So again, I'm asking how many months does it take from the start of the grant before the county would have this information? Because I need to we're doing a lot of things in the grant proposal, and they need to come together, and I need to understand what time frame you're looking at. Will it take you 2 months to do this, or a half a year, 8 months?
Right. So, if this was approved and we were say you were able to cut a PO and we were able to go, I would start immediately. Yeah, I think you can know by January 29th if you got accepted for the grant. I think is the PSE announcement, and then we would start immediately in February. And I have 2 days in my plan. The way I looked at it is we would do the site visits over the course of 2 days, and then it'll take probably about a week a piece, maybe a little less, to do the analysis, take all the observations that we saw, start breaking them down, get the impact, get all that. So you're probably accurate around a month and a half to 2 months to get the reports back. But I could do one location, say like the courthouse and the jail, work on that week, and then when I'm done with that, I could send that. So you could get it like in kind of piecemeal, or I could get it all to you at once.
No, I think 2 months is reasonable. That's what I was looking for. That gives us plenty of time to think about things and incorporate them and do a planning process and all the other tasks that we have in here. So thank you for that.
Ruben, did you have something to add?
Well, it was just to, I guess, clarify just what Nancy did as far as if it's 2 months or so, because that would give us time to start incorporating some of the recommendations into next year's budgeting process. And so to me, that's going to be an advantage. The sooner we get it, the sooner we can start maybe putting some of the justifications that are noted in the report into our budget requests, which would be helpful.
I agree. So is there going to be time to for you to put this grant together?
Me?
Yeah.
Or who? Yeah, I'm already writing it. And Ruben has already provided information. There's a blank for the faith technology info to pop in, but we're well on the way. I've done most of the other sections. We need to do some objectives here, but I don't see any problem with timing. We have another week after all.
Yeah.
Well, and I could expand on the proposals too that I sent as far as adding like if you knew that we wanted to look at solar at Norwood, say that's a pretty solid. I can expand what that would look like for timing and what we would need for extra hours to do that full analysis where you'll get helioscope, cash flows, return on investments, all that. Same with if you were pretty sure you wanted to look at a microgrid at another location. I can give you the estimated time that it would take for our engineer to do the analysis, like tie in all that stuff that would be involved, like the setting in place. That's all stuff that has to be studied and engineered because it all affects the cost.
Right. We do have solar evaluations for some of the buildings already, so we can, discuss whether there are additional ones needed. But Norwood has already had that done by two different entities. So,
And that included return on investment and everything?
yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I did look at that.
Is there any questions from the committee? Any comments?
Just a comment is that I think that we need a little bit more for deliverables than what's on where we're at right now. We need to go a little bit further in depth. But my question would be is, where is the money gonna come from to pay for all of this? Is that a part of the grant application?
Yeah,
I
that's
understood
the
it that 100% is coming out of the grant. There's no cost of the county besides staff time. Other than staff time, 100% of it is coming out of this PSC grant.
What if we feel that it's necessary that we do some of this and we don't get the grant? Are we still gonna go forward with some of the work?
We would have to come up with some budget money. Currently there's no budget for any study other than the grant funds. So it's all dependent on the PSC grant as of right now.
Do we have any indication, or would we have any indication from Faith Technology, the increase to get more data, 25% increase, 50% increase, 100, 200, what? Any idea what that additional cost would be, or does it matter if it's all going to be paid for under the grant?
I would ask, for as much as we can get if it's all grant funded. Is that the committee's feeling on?
Might be.
I think we should ask for whatever we can get. The more information, the better if it's paid for by the PSC.
Without jeopardizing the grant.
That was if we ask for too much, are we gonna have less of a chance of receiving the grant money? But
No.
Nancy seemed to think that it would increase our chance, so.
Well, if you do a thorough study and you can articulate that you're going to be ready to go when you're done with this, that's what they're looking for. And I believe this pool is up to 100,000, so we'll be nowhere near that. Plus, we'll have a fair amount of in-kind that we can show between my time, Ruben's time. Even though that's not required, it's looked upon favorably, in grant competitions. I think because the county has already had reports done, has a plan, has taken some steps, it indicates to them that you're a good investment, right? It's not like a county coming in from the blue suddenly saying we want to do energy things. Not that they won't compete, but you have the edge from my perspective.
I would agree with Nancy. We're involved with writing a few of these too, and you guys have taken the initiative and you have things in motion, and you got a decent plan laid out there. What I would recommend is that definitely I go back and I can add scope to what I propose to you guys. I basically propose the first step. I'd say we take it at least 2 more steps and get to ease of implementation and get some more studies as far as if you're looking at a microgrid or a boiler replacement. Scott Johnson came up there with me, and he is really solid on controls. Him and Ruben, I think, had good conversations, and he could expand on his scope on some of that stuff with Ruben's guidance. Yeah, and I could pull that stuff together before the deadline. That's my 2 cents.
And then where are we at in terms of the fuel assessment?
For the buildings, that would be, I'd lean on Scott, and he's already started. Again, we're kind of don't have a ton of knowledge of what's going on because I don't have any gas bills or anything that I'm aware of. So some of it is hypothetical. But we're just 2 weeks into this, so we're way behind the ball on that.
Well, we're not asking you to do assessments ahead of time, that's for sure. So for
Right.
the committee, question for the committee, do you want to prioritize which buildings would get their fuel use evaluated? Or do you want all the facilities looked at, the whole county fuel use? What's your inclination? We were able to prioritize the buildings for electricity because you had had that RETA study done by UW, so we had a sense for electrical use, but we're kind of running on not knowing too much. We could probably take a stab at the priorities, but what are you guys thinking in terms of direction there?
Until we get a report, how are we gonna know which has the greatest return on investment as we go through with this committee? I think the priorities are gonna depend upon what we get as a return on investment for a particular type of strategy.
Oh no, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I shifted from electricity use to fuel use because there's a fuel assessment in here too, based on vehicles and facility use.
Are you asking, Nancy, which facilities we should evaluate fuel use on? Because I think all 5 that are identified should certainly be looked at.
Right. Do you want it limited to all 5? Or do you want to look at all of the fuel use across the county?
You mean including vehicles?
Vehicles and all the facilities versus 5 facilities.
As far as facilities go, I mean, starting with the 5 main facilities, I think is going to be quite a task. I mean, we can certainly go beyond that, and if the committee wants to get into every single building, there's just going to be a lot less identified for improvements when you get into the really smaller outbuildings and things like that. Those are things that as we get into the more comprehensive study on the 5 facilities, we'll be able to take the lessons learned, the improvements made, and do those in some of the smaller, the park shelters and things like that. I mean, again, if the committee wants a thorough study on all the smaller buildings, I won't oppose that. I don't know if I don't see as much value in the time spent on those smaller pieces, personally.
I agree with Ruben.
Yeah, I can't say if it would be easier or more difficult with than electricity. It was complicated to get all the electricity information because there are so many providers to the buildings across the county. There's probably 5 or 6, and the utilities didn't have, it's not one-stop shopping. Each department is coded differently. It was very complicated, but for fuel, I don't know. Maybe it's you're asking one or two sources and you say, grab all of the data for all of the facilities. I'm not sure on that. Because it may not be any more steps, or it may be. I don't know what that landscape looks like here.
So Nancy, just to help add to what you're saying there, one of the recommendations that I already have top of the list is that we look at a PME program where you literally pull all that data from all those locations onto one platform, and then you got it right at the tips of your fingers, so you're not chasing all that. Because just knowing is half the battle, and there's known return on investments for having that data at your fingertips. And
Oh, yeah, definitely.
that's definitely something I would be already recommending just from listening and visiting, is because like you said, you're crossing different entities of electrical providers and gas providers. You're all over the board on that. This system would be right on the supply side, so you would have all that information, and you could check your utility bills too right off of that. You would be able to compare, because meters do go bad. We've seen that where the utility meter has failed or is incorrect over time.
Well, and monitoring is it's really helpful. Like I learned a lot about fuel consumption because I have an instantaneous gauge in my car, and so I got really competitive. Like I can do better. I can do better.
Yep.
I mean, it's just getting feedback like that does incentivize you.
And you can trend. So if things are, so normally this is where it's at, and all of a sudden we're way out of line, then you know something might be happening. It's a troubleshooting tool too. So we recommend that. That's a starting point that we recommend all over the board when we do these assessments, is having that data and that knowledge. And that's something I could do a little more assessment on, like a project analysis on that, what that would take to take that complete, like you guys are asking for more project details and with ROIs, and I could run with something like that too.
Did you have something, Dave?
Yeah, I'm just looking at is that on one of these proposals, we have a level 1 deliverables, and we could talk about level 2 and level 3. Where do we find out what those deliverables would be if we expand the proposal and the study? When would we get that information, and who is going to evaluate it at the point?
Yeah, again, I'm used to, and it's not that we can't do it, but I'm used to taking the levels one at a time, not quoting them all like right up the pipe, you know. But that's the process we do. So level 1 is kind of what I shared with you. Level 2 is once you guys would prioritize the items, then we go to collecting the more in-depth details, and then coming up with possible solutions with ROIs. That's kind of the level 2 level. And then level 3 obviously is writing the scope of the project. That's where I was saying I could go back and see how comfortable some of the people that helped me with the level 2 would be on estimating what that would be, and get a number that gets into the grant.
Dave, when this grant is written by you and Nancy, it's going to have to be as expansive as possible, because this is the one shot at funding for this. There's no level 2 funding after the grant money is used up. So if there's going to be a study or an evaluation, it's all going to have to be on this PSC grant. So you're going to have to estimate level 2 costs. And it's going to have to go into the grant application, because there's absolutely zero funding from the county on this. This is all grant funded.
Yep, yep. No, I'm getting that now. And that'd be the rest of my day would be talking to those people and getting those estimates.
And back to the
just-
scope of the grant, I
Yeah,
think everybody is in agreement that it should be as expansive as possible. If it can be included in the grant, included in the grant, you can never have too much information.
So is the fuel assessment included in this proposal?
for you asking me, Nancy?
Yes.
What we were looking at, we were going to look at it from an equipment level, not necessarily a building level. So we have not had a chance to go through the full building. So like we would have to figure out what's using fuel in the building. And I know Ruben mentioned that there are some rooftops that are hooked up to gas and some that aren't. So it's hard to really understand. So what I could do is estimate what it would take to do a fuel analysis. Kind of like if you look at the bottom of our report, that's all electrical type stuff. We could do something similar with natural gas. But I would have to estimate some of our data engineer guys' time to do that. And I can do that. That's not a problem.
Okay, that was my question. Is it says energy, so I wasn't sure if it was already included or not. So
Yeah, the first, like, again, I apologize. I probably should have taken this to level 2. I didn't. That would have been the way to go. But the level 1 just identifies the opportunity. The level 2 gets more into the meat and potatoes of the actual projects that potentially could save money, with the returns and stuff. I'm pretty clear on what I know I have to do.
Hold on 1 second, Dave.
Did we want to touch real briefly on the possibility of including in the study, looking at vehicle fuel usage as well? Because that's been talked about a little bit. I think it was mentioned at our last meeting. Nancy has mentioned that to Faith Technologies, and that's not something that is real common for them to do, and so they would be bringing in a partner with them to look at that. I don't know if the committee wants to address that at this time to say, hey, we definitely want that to be included in this proposal for the grant money to cover a study on that, or do we maybe wait to see what a level 2 study identifies and make that a next step?
Well, if we want that included on an energy study, we would have to decide that today, because Nancy's going to write the grant.
Right, so that's
Before
what
we
I
meet
mean.
again.
We should kind of address that and see how the committee feels if you want to have that included, see if we can get that in there as well right now. Something to talk about.
So is that something that is known by the departments through their annual reporting? Do they know how much fuel they buy every year?
Good.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That a quick inquiry, I'm assuming the sheriff's department is gonna burn the most fuel?
Between them and
No.
highway,
Lance,
probably
you-
highway.
You got highway. There
So
is some
highway,
safety,
sheriff's?
but even, you're really looking at vehicles that would be used by social services and those types of usage. You got your big highway trucks, you got highway equipment, the diesel equipment they use. Your sheriff's department, I get the move possibly to, other alternative energy sources, but those guys run more than 200 miles in a day, and you don't have time to sit down and recharge those before they go out. At this point, the technology may exist at some point, but the sheriff's department breaks that down. They know exactly what they spend on fuel, as does the highway department.
So a quick telephone call would tell us, sheriff's department, highway department.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we should do that.
Is that, are there any other questions or comments about the inclusion of a fuel study?
I like the meat and potatoes, that's what I think.
To include that, you say?
I will tell you. I'll tell you on a fuel study, they're going to be looking for maintenance costs too, because if you're thinking of switching from gas to electric, There's also a maintenance savings in there too. And then there's usually an educational piece for your service guys because the same guys that service gas powered vehicles may not be the same. You're going to maybe want some newer techs that are more educated on electrical. So I've seen grant writings where they're including all that too. Nancy, you probably too, if you look back in 2018, where it was specific to the vehicle study from gas to electric. They go a lot deeper than just the cost of the gas and the cost of electricity. They go into the maintenance of it and the longevity of the vehicles.
And this, like, as Lance said, this wouldn't be, the sheriff's department wouldn't have the capability of going to electric, and the highway department, the bigger vehicles, it would be, the health department, maybe a couple health department people running over to Adams County would be beneficial too. But
Well, what I've seen in the Portage County vehicle assessment was they put in no or low idling functionality into their sheriff department vehicles so that when they're stopped, it's not idling, it shuts off and then it has immediate response. So there's other options besides EV and fuel. You know what I mean? And there's hybrid too that gets you both. So I think all of those options maybe you would want to understand at least to some extent.
That was the study would provide, is a look at that and maybe some recommendations on some ways to improve.
yeah,
You can grab the numbers right away though. Those are available instant.
as far as fuel usage,
Fuel
yeah.
usage, yeah.
Well, it's been looked at recently with mileage.
So is it the consensus to include a fuel study? Is that what Did you get that, Nancy?
Yeah, there's some background noise, but you're saying include a fuel study?
Yeah.
So Faith would take care of the facilities or one of their partners, and we would handle the vehicles internally. Is that correct?
Well, I think we would need a third party to do, it's not just the amount of fuel used. Are we capable of doing a study like that?
I don't know. I will have to ask other, like the extension energy people, whether they are able to help us if we can get the data. And if not, we may need a consultant, and maybe they can suggest someone that has been doing that work with other communities.
Well, I think as long as we're writing a grant for it, we should just include, a third party, whether it be
Okay.
Faith Technologies or, an affiliate.
Yeah, I don't think they do. Faith doesn't do that kind of work, so we would need to find someone else to do that.
We can help you identify someone, Nancy. We're the largest installer of EV chargers in the US. So we work with a lot of companies that have done those analysis. So we might be able to get you a name of someone locally that has helped do that analysis.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments about what is going to be included, or just make it as deep as possible? I think it's
Go for the whole ball of
Yeah.
wax.
like you said, there's a lot of room between what is this, the Faith invoice is 23,000, and it's what's the cap, 100,000 for
Yes.
the grant. So there's plenty of room to include a lot more. And like I said, you can't have enough information. So as deep as and as expansive as you can make it, I think it's the better.
Sounds
As
good.
long as you don't think it'll decrease our chances, to receive the grant.
I probably wouldn't recommend taking it up all the way up to 100,000. I think they're thinking, if you pay a person to do strategic planning to pull the whole thing together, that's pretty costly. But you're not having to pay for that because you hired me. So I'm doing that part of it. You know what I mean? So when they're thinking 100,000, they're thinking the cost to do that in addition to these assessments. So we want to stay well below 100K, I would suggest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Al. I just have a
Go ahead, Al.
comment. I just have a comment. I can see, including as much as we can at this point, but realistically, I don't think you'll ever see EV in the highway department because of the massive trucks and the equipment, as Lance noted. And then also with the sheriff's department, as Lance said too, these vehicles have to be ready to pounce on when they get a call. I don't think EV at this point would be feasible, probably sometime in the future, or for some of their cars that aren't patrol cars. But just in that comment, in the back of my mind.
Yeah,
Thanks, Al.
interestingly, my cousin is a truck mechanic in the Chicagoland area, and he said they're seeing a complete transition of truck fleet to EV.
I can speak to that. We have huge contracts with Peterbilt, Freightliner, Oshkosh Trucks. I mean, in the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. They're converting all those trucks to EV. It's going to be It's going to probably be even faster than cars once they get going, because they're big equipment. They can carry big batteries.
So hold on one second, Dave.
All the cars are going to idling, like Dave's got one. When you sit, they just go down to an idle. They stop running actually.
Yeah.
It's,
It stops.
it's more so idle reduction than
Right.
Yeah, and
yeah, especially the sheriff's department.
Yes, yeah.
that's a good spot to start. Let other people pilot and figure out the other stuff. You guys got other things you can attack to save money.
Are there any other questions or comments? Nancy, do you have sufficient guidance on what you want included in this, or do you have any other questions about what to include or what not to include?
Well, no, not in terms of content, but is there an approval process for the budget once we get all the numbers from Dale, or is that not as essential because county money isn't involved, or can you tell me how that will work?
Well, there's no county money involved, so it's I think everybody'd be more than happy to accept grant funds. Lance?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, we have to have a budget resolution to accept them, but, yes.
But who is going to do that? Is the RNS committee going to do that? Property committee? Who's going to be the one that's got to put together that budget resolution?
Any of the above, including finance, anybody can put that together.
Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty straightforward, though. I think everybody's.
It's a pretty standard resolution, you just fill in the amount and where it's coming from.
So procedurally, that happens after an award? Am I understanding that right? It's not something we need to do before we submit it?
After we receive the grant funds.
Okay.
That's how I understand it. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have a rough estimate what the chances of the grant funds being awarded to us would be? You have just off the top of your head?
Not at this time. They do provide the merit review criteria. So how they're how they're scoring each proposal. So for the different elements, they give you points, and you want to be within a certain range. So I will look at that before I submit it. It's always important to look at that because there are little tweaks you can make, or you can be planning on doing something, but you didn't identify it that clearly in the grant proposal, so you risk not getting those points, and you need to go back and make sure you're very clear that you're doing certain things. So I often do that I skim them at the beginning and then I do them again towards the end. The one piece that would have been really iffy is, the state is very interested in justice and equity. And so, as part of the educational component, I added some work that Jackie Caratini and I were talking about doing in terms of providing energy efficiencies to lower income families, whether it's through donations of insulation and LED bulbs and that sort of thing. We haven't sorted out those details, but we've been talking about doing this for a couple years now as part of our extension outreach. So I've included that in there as one of the justice components. But that's the only area that that we're light on. We will be light on, I think. At least we're making an attempt to include and think about those things, though.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I think we're ready to go. So you're set. You don't need any more information from the committee or guidance?
Not at this time. I don't foresee anything popping up. Ruben, how are you sitting with this?
Yeah, I guess as long as you have, I would say the same. If you don't need anything else from me, I think, we went through quite a bit, and the discussion with Faith was good. So if they're able to provide a little more info on a little more in-depth analysis, that'd be great. I would say if there is anything, county board is prior to the deadline, so it's possible if you need something, Nancy, that you could ask Jake to set something up for maybe that day, if needed.
Mm-hmm. A quick meeting before county board.
Okay, thank you. So we're still working with Jason to submit this. Jason Grinenberg's team is going to submit it since Extension can't be doing those kinds of things. We had our roundtable meeting this morning, so he's involved with that, I believe.
Yeah.
And then Ruben, I'm sure I'll be in touch. I'm not going to sew this whole thing out without additional input from you and Jason, and particularly since we don't have final estimates from Faith yet, I don't feel good about being the person that says, yes, we're including all of this, or no, we're not. So I'll look to you, Ruben, and I presume you're coordinating with other facility managers to make sure we're doing what is needed.
Right.
Okay. Bill?
So we're not locked into a $23,000 grant request. We'd be locked into anything between 23,000 and
It's going to be
40.
23 is the preliminary here, so it's going to be higher than 23 and under much under 100. All right, that covers the PSC grant. Future agenda items in the next meeting are dependent on how this grant goes and if we need to meet before county board, so we won't set a date and a time today. And there's nothing else? Nobody has anything? If not, I'll declare the meeting adjourned at 9:54. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.